Welcome back to RoomPack's ResEdChat. And today I have with me a very special person, someone who's near and dear to me, Dr. Hilary Lichterman, who's the Senior Associate Director of Residence Life at University of South Carolina. How are you doing, Hilary?
Oh my goodness, one of my favorites. You're like a brother, Dr. Paul Gordon Brown. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Things are good. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. Big virtual hugs to you. It's not the same. I can't wait. I'm counting down the seconds.
I know.
My favorite people.
With all the COVID craziness and not traveling and all this other stuff, like no conferences, like thank God those are going to be starting back up again.
Yeah.
We'll see each other soon.
That's right. That's right.
And for those of you who are listening or watching, Hilary and I actually go back quite a bit, a number of years in our past. We both participated in ACUHO-I's NHTI, National Housing Training Institute, which is an amazing experience. So if you ever have the opportunity to do it, I would highly recommend it. It's for training future executive directors, senior housing professionals, things like that. I loved it. Hilary, I don't know how it impacted you.
Incredible. I mean, I know I've told you the story 100 times, but I remember sitting in our clusters and doing those activities and, here's a gnarly budget scenario. What do you do? And it was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I have found, I don't know if you found this, but there are so many people, like really good people who have stayed in the field and done some really awesome things that came out of that experience, right? Like they didn't know who they were beforehand. They hadn't yet kind of hit their stride professionally, but like, man, they took off, right?
It's incredible. And that now the 2 degrees of separation and, whether you were in the same cohort or you've been part of that cohort or, working on campuses, we're just, it's a small but mighty profession. It really is. I'm so glad we've kept in touch over the years.
Well, you've served as a faculty member, have you not?
Well, I will be actually.
Oh.
That's right. This year, in 2021, virtually.
Nice. Oh, is it all virtual?
Yeah. So that'll be different. And
yeah, it will be different.
Trying to find that good energy and how do we create still that like 110%, focus on you and not any dinging and pinging of other things on the electronic devices. So I'm so excited.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Will you be eating cheese while you're presenting?
Did you know? Well, I know you know that I'm from Wisconsin, right? But yesterday, oh my gosh, Paul, we have to edit that. Did you know that I celebrate National Cheese Lovers Day every day?
I subscribe to that philosophy. I should eat more cheese.
Remember when we had poutine in Canada?
Oh yeah.
That was great.
I love me some poutine. Cheese curds anytime, always, all forms.
Now, what's the trick? Remember we talked about this, room temp. See how I just tell you, room temp, they gotta squeak.
Gotta squeak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love me a squeaky curd.
Oh, it's true.
It's true. Well, I got you kind of on the show today because obviously you know a little bit about the curricular approach, having been an author of this lovely tome, which I would highly suggest to folks. I'll leave some information about it in the show notes, but the curricular approach to student affairs, which is just pretty brand new. I mean, mine still smells new. It hasn't quite gotten fully dog-eared yet, but I love it. So I wanted you on because I wanted to talk a little bit about curricular stuff. But what's the pitch for this book? Like if you were to say, who should read it? What are they going to take away from it? What's kind of your pitch for this book?
Well, you are too kind, but I really cannot give enough credit and shout out and love to the fellow co-authors, so Dr. Kathleen Kerr, Dr. Keith Edwards, Dr. Jim Tweedy, and Dr. Amanda Knurr. Just so much fun thinking together and being able to put some stories and life to that. So my pitch is really, truly that book was written for those who are interested in the profession. Remember us when we were way young back in the day as student leaders thinking, I think this could be a career. So to understand a broader, 50,000 foot look at the institution and student affairs, all the way up to presidents and vice presidents of student affairs. There's a lot of goodness in there about student learning, of course, but how do we do that and achieve that and partner with students in the context of our own campuses and not use a huge paintbrush and look at higher education solely, on its own, but looking at our own campuses and, good pedagogy and organizational development and what's the leadership that's needed to really deliver on this curricular approach, all in the spirit of benefiting students and their learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing about it too is, the curricular approach, formerly referred to as the residential curriculum, has been with us for, gosh, what are we up to now? Are we up to 12, 13, a little over a decade now. And there hasn't been a one good written source to go to really learn the whole thing from like beginning to end, right? Like
Right.
I've done some writing on it. I've
Yep.
tried to put some stuff together, but there hasn't been a formally published, here you go, book. So I think it's been very necessary. I'm glad you and the co-authors, kind of put it together. But it's a great gift to the field.
Thank you. And yeah, I was going to mention your blogs are just so digestible and have been really good tools as a practitioner myself and working with practitioners my whole career. It's been really great to say, hey, read this, try to understand this, or here's an example or two. So you're right. We just have to keep adding. And I'm so glad you're doing this podcast. I think it's so necessary and important to have meaningful conversations about our profession and the work we do and the gamut of it, right? The intellectual, the philosophical, the practical, organizational, like it all matters. And so I think this is such a valuable addition.
Yeah, I hope so. That's what we're trying to do. I was thinking about, okay, I'm going to speak with Hilary today. So besides cheese, what are we going to talk about? And one of the things I wanted to pick your brain about that I've been thinking a lot about, which is having gone through the COVID pandemic, or at least a majority of it, right? And having everything being upended, it's challenging, right? It challenged staff in a ton of ways, but it also presented some opportunities to do things differently. Yeah. And so like, where are we going to end up, especially as we think about a curricular approach? Where are we going to end up in the future? So I know you're on a campus, so you've been thinking about this. I'm not on a campus on a day-to-day basis. How did the pandemic and being more virtual and more distant impact your curriculum? Like, what were some of the things that you encountered and had to work through?
Yeah, wow. Well, I think about when we really, this really struck and we really realized, wow, this is happening. I remember schools like USF, right, with our good friend, Dr. Julie Leos and her amazing team. I remember, them saying, we've got bulls in the cloud, I think is what they called it, right? We're just going to pivot and here we go. I think that was brilliant. And I think that really set the stage for a lot of campuses. So as I look now, hope, a little bit more in the rear view mirror of where we've been, I think we just have such an opportunity to use technology differently. And we've been saying that. We had said that prior to the pandemic, but I think now we were forced that there wasn't another choice, right? In some parts of the country and the world and in some campuses being 100% remote and virtual was the option. So I think we have learned so much about tools and getting away from this either or students. If students don't come in person and come together, then there's no sense of belonging or connection or friendship making. And I think we've been proven differently in that, right? That there's so many fun, even games that can be done online and social times. And even as a profession with family friends, right? We've all adapted to how do we use technology differently. So I think that's been huge. I think about as we now look a little bit more in the rear view mirror with the pandemic, we've had to really restructure, and I think we'll need to look at our organizations and look at the infrastructure, looking at about, how if we have less staff or we've had to change staffing roles or positions or more for cut, whatever the case might be. I think this curricular approach has lended so well to stay mission centric, to get very, very clear on what is the guiding priority. And sure, we might do it differently, or we might stop doing X, Y, and Z so that we could refocus. Even budgets, right, Paul? Like, my goodness gracious, like budgets have been all over the place. And so I think when I think about the curricular approach, we learn so much about not everything requires money, or perhaps we need to invest our money into different technology or into different platforms to engage our students and our own staff.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's one of the things I was in, I was on a panel. I forget what panel this was, but for a conference. And someone had asked a question about, obviously I work for RoomPack, so I work for a software company. And one of the insights I gave folks when they asked, you know, like, what are you seeing at schools was, you would think because of the budget impact that people would be less willing to buy software, which is true for some schools less so than others. Like some are like, we're fine, everything's as it was, minus a few little cuts here and there.
Mm.
But another current has been, well, we also need technology more in order to be able to do what it is, right? So if you even were to look at RoomHack sales, there's this current like of budget cuts that are kind of going against selling software, but then also this other current that says, well, this is our new reality, we need it more, that's cutting in the opposite direction. That it's been really interesting. I've seen it from the RoomHack side of things.
Right. It really does make sense. I mean, it's a very interesting current, and I think, shame on us if we don't jump on the wave and explore what can we do differently, right? Like we are a solid profession, we're a solid area of what we've been doing for years. We have this very unforeseen and unfortunate reality, but I think shame on us if we don't come out now on a different side of it to stop doing what we don't need to do, or reinvest our dollars, or change our staffing structures, or explore different partnerships, right? Sometimes we get good partnerships are hard to find and they take time to cultivate, but do we need to add different layers to our partnerships now, or explore different, strategies? So
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things you said that I've been thinking about a lot, I'm glad you mentioned it, was kind of this idea of how we assumed that student affairs or residence life work had to be done, couldn't be replaced with a more distant technological kind of digital way of doing things. And that, we get into a mode and say, this is how it's always been done. This is how things, work. If you do it that way, it won't be quite the same. And I think that's true sometimes. But I also think what COVID kind of did was it really, because you were forced to do it, you might go, oh, well, that actually wasn't as bad, or that actually was better in some ways doing it this way than the way we would always done it.
yes. And to me, the equalizer there is it still requires that same level of oomph, if you will, or that same level of heartbeat of that love for the student experience. How we get there and what we're doing along the way might look very different, but it's still keeping that student experience as the heartbeat of what drives us.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yeah. I encounter it sometimes too, if I'm training a campus on using a software tool, you're trying to get people to do something differently than the way they've done it before. Like, here's this new software package and it can do all these things. But I mean, I do this too as a user. I'm used to doing it this way and it works for me. So you need to tell me why I need to change.
Right. What's the problem?
Yeah, you're telling me it'll be shorter, but like I have to learn it, which will take longer in order to get shorter. So I'm not really going to invest that time right now.
Right.
And that's, I think, what COVID kind of broke through. I mean, right?
I really do.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Because you and I have been faculty members on the Institute for a number of years. And one of the things we always talk about in the Institute, right, is essentialism. Like, do less so you can do more. What are the most important things? And I mean, if there's a crash course in essentialism, I think this pandemic kind of just forced it on folks.
We all need our certificates. Yes.
We do. We need a medal. I need our professional associations to be I survived COVID, like little pins.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Oh, it's just wow. And to think about, to your point, we have to pivot, we have to be open to change, and to recognize the pandemic will not be, COVID will not be our only massive crisis. There will be the next wave of something different. We probably don't know what that is yet, but these are valuable lessons to take time to stop, take stock and to really hear from students, what their experience was like. And we know that. We know assessment is so important. But I think really helping students look in their rearview mirror from this time will help them and their reflection and their growth, but it will help maybe reinforce positive reinforcement, what we're really doing well and what we should keep doing. And that might be very different than what we would answer or what we think. So I think keeping that open line of communication and that eagerness to hear from students. So what was that like for you? Or what could we do differently to help you make friends or understand resources available when it's not just let's pop over across the street together? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if you had to make, I guess, one prediction, this is kind of, if there's ever a truly post-COVID, but post-COVID, couple years out, maybe even 3 or 4, what's the one change that you think is going to stick? And you can be really specific, like you can be very micro-specific or broader, but Hilary Lichterman today will give us a prediction that in 3 to 4 years in residence life, this is one of the things that will have permanently changed as a result of this.
Oh my goodness, that's a beautiful question. Wow.
Right? Put you on the spot.
Ooh, that is so excellent.
It'll be even better if I come back in 3 to 4 years from
I know, and hit replay. Hey, was she right or was she way
Yeah,
off?
I will mark it on my calendar.
Oh my goodness, you do have a good memory, my friend. Wow. A prediction about residence life or the student experience,
I'm gonna say residence life. Let's go with the residence life, which could encompass in part the student experience, but something with a res life angle.
Yeah. I think our partnerships will need to change. I think because we have such a captive audience with students, right? Students start and end their days with us. And we have so much heart and soul with what we can do with the student experience. I think when we look at conditions from the pandemic, we look at resources, and we just look at the way of the world in higher education, I think we will need to work with campus partners and alumni and those local communities in a very different way than we do now. Meaning, I think the curve for skill development beyond the classroom will advance exponentially. We're certainly doing that right now. Absolutely, right? There are a lot of life skills that happen in the residential setting. But I think even starting that curve earlier with employability skills, which we've talked about as a profession forever. Yes, but I think the ability to work with graduate programs more, with pre-professional programs, I think the ability to help those students nurture those networks. I think what I'm really saying is that next level iteration of living learning programs, right?
Yeah.
And taking those partnerships to redefining them beyond maybe to deeper collaboration on behalf of the students and less solid partnerships.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think what you say makes good sense. Like, I think, it's true. You and I have been in the field long enough. I mean, let's be honest, we're still very young. Very young and spry. But you and I have been around the block enough times to know some things that have been with us for a while that have taken us a very long time to get to. And we've gotten to some of them. Like, I think, like assessment is not a new concept. I think for some institutions it might be because, a new staff member came in, new leader, and said this is important. But I think we've made more headway on assessment as a whole, right?
I do.
Partnerships, you mentioned living learning communities. Like, I think there's a lot of living learning communities that do it really, really well. But how much of the broader student experience, whether they live in a living learning community or not, are getting those same kinds of goals? Like, I don't know that it's been like, here's our students that are lucky enough to live here, get this experience, right, and then everyone else has this other experience, right?
And you know that's why we love the curricular approach and that lens of really looking at it's not the in and out crowd. It's not some get and some don't. This is intended, the lens, the glasses, right? It's for every student who lives with us.
Yeah.
And then there are those pockets of, additional goodness here and there, maybe by a theme or with a resource, maybe a faculty member, but right, really leveling that experience and then leveling it up to advance that curve a little faster for our students who live in a fast-paced world. And as we use more technology, I think that will only increase. And so I think, bringing my comment full circle, I think the world and the energy and the technology of what we experience in our lives will be an excellent catalyst and an energy booster towards we need to advance our programs and be thinking about that.
Yeah. We need to prepare students for the jobs that they're going to seek, not the ones that we sought when we went through our educational experience, right?
Right. So true. And not just say it's one or the other. Not to say that we're doing that present day, or not, but it's not just the connections and community and building. That is pivotal, foundational, will always be necessary, but advancing that other piece of that curve as well, a little quicker, faster for the students.
Gosh, well, now I'm hopeful, Hilary. Thank you very much. Now the future is bright.
Oh, and I know you, Paul, you've already marked your calendar for 3 years. Let's pull that back up.
Yeah, you got it. Well, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. Obviously, you and I think it can be tell from anyone watching this that you and I enjoy each other's company very much and have good conversations. But thank you for hopping on and sharing your wisdom.
Oh gosh, thank you for having me. And like I said at the beginning, you're more than a colleague, you're a friend, you're like a brother. So it's always good to connect.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Hilary. I appreciate it. And this has been another episode of ResEdChat, sponsored by RoomPax. So if you have any other ideas for episodes or want to talk with different folks, let us know. And otherwise, we'll see you next week, next month, next time we have an episode.